Back in 2019, I was sharing a cheap apartment in Chicago with two guys. Jake, my loudmouth best friend from college, and Daniel, this quiet, almost too polite guy who worked night shifts at some lab. We barely saw Daniel. Dude was like a shadow. He'd leave at weird hours, and half the time, I wasn't even sure he'd slept in his room. Jake and I started joking that he was a ghost. Ghost Daniel became our running bit. We'd mock complain about his ectoplasm in the shower drain or haunt his empty room with toy Ouija boards. It was dumb, but it kept us entertained. Until the night the joke stopped being funny. It was a Tuesday, around 11 p.m. Jake and I were binge-watching Stranger Things when we heard it. Faint music coming from Daniel's room. Not just any music, his weird ambient synth playlist, the one he always played while working. The door was shut, but light bled under it. Jake elbowed me. Ghost Daniels finally materialized, he grinned. We knocked, calling his name. Nothing. The music kept looping, that same eerie chord. Jake pulled out his phone and called Daniel. Seconds later, we heard it, the muffled marimba ringtone inside the room. My stomach dropped. The call went to voicemail. Then, at 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Sorry, I've been out of town for 2 weeks. I showed Jake the text, and we just stared at each other in the dim blue light of the TV. The music from Daniel's room had stopped at some point, but neither of us had heard the door open. The apartment was dead silent now, the kind of quiet where you notice the hum of the fridge like it's screaming. Jake, trying to laugh it off, said, "Okay, that's weird. Maybe he left his phone here." But we both knew Daniel never went anywhere without it. Dude treated that thing like it was surgically attached to his hand. My skin prickled. I wanted to check his room right then, but Jake shook his head. "Tomorrow," he muttered. Neither of us slept much. The next morning, Daniel's door was slightly ajar. Not enough to see inside, just a black sliver of space. Jake nudged it open with his foot, and the smell hit us first, damp like old laundry left in a gym bag. The room was empty. No phone, no laptop, just his neatly made bed and a layer of dust on the desk. The weirdest part? The window was locked from the inside, and his keys were on the nightstand. Jake picked them up, then dropped them like they burned him. "Dude," he whispered, "if he's been gone for 2 weeks, who turned on the music last night?" My mouth went dry. That's when I noticed it. On the desk, a single sticky note with our names scribbled in Daniel's handwriting. "Don't look for me." We called Daniel's number again, but this time, it went straight to voicemail, like the phone had been turned off or destroyed. Jake started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "This is some Twilight Zone shit," he kept saying. I tried calling Daniel's lab, but the receptionist said he'd taken emergency leave 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. That was before he supposedly texted us. My hand was shaking as I scrolled back through our group chat. The last message from him was over a month ago, just a thumbs up emoji. So who the hell had texted us last night? I could feel my pulse in my throat. That's when we heard the knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps on the front door. Jake and I froze. No one ever came over this early, and the delivery guys always buzzed from downstairs. The knock came again, louder. I crept to the door and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. Just as I turned back to Jake, the knocking started again, but this time it wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from inside Daniel's room. A cold sweat broke over my back. The sticky note was still in my hand. "Don't look for me." Too late. Jake lunged for the baseball bat he kept behind the couch. "Screw this," he hissed, and before I could stop him, he kicked Daniel's door wide open. The room was still empty, but the air felt wrong, thick like walking through cobwebs. Then we saw it. The closet door, which had been shut all morning, was now cracked open just enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. The knocking had stopped. My brain screamed at me to run, but Jake, white-knuckling the bat, marched over and yanked the closet door open. For a second, there was nothing. Then a choked gasp escaped Jake's throat. Hanging inside was Daniel's favorite hoodie, the gray one he always wore. It was dripping wet, reeking of lake water. Even though it had been bone dry when we checked earlier, we bolted out of the apartment so fast, I barely remembered grabbing my keys. Outside, the afternoon sun felt like a sick joke. Jake kept wiping his hands on his jeans like he'd touched something rotten. "We're not staying there tonight," he said, voice cracking. I agreed, but as we sat in a diner nursing coffees, my phone buzzed. Another text from Daniel's number. "You shouldn't have opened the closet." Jake's phone buzzed too, a photo notification. When he opened it, he gagged. It was a picture of us, taken that morning, standing in Daniel's room. The timestamp said it was sent 3 days ago. That's when I noticed a figure in the closet behind us, barely visible in the shadows. Tall, thin, Smiling, we showed the photo to a cop later that day. He squinted at it, then handed my phone back like we'd wasted his time. "Looks like a glitch," he said, "or a prank." But when we got home, the hoodie wasn't in the closet anymore. It was folded neatly on Daniel's bed, dry as bone. Jake started laughing, this jagged, unhinged sound, and said, "We're losing it, man." I almost believed him until I checked my laptop. My search history was full of things I'd never looked up. How long can a body go undiscovered? Can a phone send texts after death? The last search, made at 2:03 a.m. the night before, was what to do if your roommate isn't human. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I hadn't typed that. I wouldn't have. The text kept coming. Always when we weren't home, always about things we'd just done. "You forgot to lock the door." We had. Jake's coffee tastes better with 2 sugars. He just started taking 2 sugars that week. Once at 3 a.m., my phone lit up with, "Stop pretending you can't hear me breathing." I threw my phone across the room. Jake found it in the morning inside Daniel's locked bedroom, plugged into the wall like it had been charging for hours. We stopped talking about it, stopped joking. The silence between us grew teeth. And then, 2 weeks later, I woke up to the smell of Daniel's cologne, something sharp and chemical, like hospital antiseptic. On my pillow was a sticky note, the same loopy handwriting. "You can look now." I woke Jake up, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip his shoulder. We stood in the hallway, staring at my bedroom door, neither of us willing to say what we both knew. The cologne smell was coming from inside Daniel's room. The door was slightly open again, just a sliver, but this time the light was on. Not the overhead bulb, but the dim, flickering glow of his salt lamp. The one he bought at a flea market because it calmed the energy. The air smelled like wet earth now, like something freshly dug up. Jake's voice was a whisper. "We have to look. We have to know." I grabbed a kitchen knife. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Daniel's room was different. The walls were covered in photos, hundreds of them, taped haphazardly, curling at the edges. Photos of us, Jake and me, sleeping, eating, arguing over takeout. Some were so old, they must have been taken before we even moved in together. In the center of the room, his desk was piled with notebooks, each page filled with the same sentence. Over and over, "I was never here." But the worst part? The bed. It wasn't empty anymore. There was a shape under the covers, motionless. Jake reached out, gripping the blanket, and yanked it back. The mattress was stained dark, the sheets crusted with something dried and flaking. No body, just a single, curled Polaroid on the pillow. We picked it up. It was a picture of us, taken from inside the closet the night we heard the knocking, and written on the back, in fresh ink, "You were the ghosts the whole time." The next morning, all the photos were gone. The room was spotless, bed made, desk empty, even the salt lamp unplugged. When I tried to show Jake the Polaroid, it had vanished from my pocket. We didn't speak, just packed our bags in silence and left before sunset. But as I turned to lock the apartment door one last time, I caught our reflection in the hallway mirror. Except it wasn't us. Jake's reflection was still packing behind me, oblivious. Mine was staring right back at me, smiling, and then it winked. The real horror wasn't Daniel's room. It was realizing we'd never be able to leave. Because the apartment wasn't haunted. We were about a year later, I got a notification, a Google Photos memory from 1 year ago. It was a video. Jake and I, asleep on the couch, the camera creeping closer like someone was crouching in front of us. The timestamp? Last night. I live alone now, but sometimes when I wake up gasping at 3 a.m., I hear it. 3 knocks. Not on the door, on my phone screen, and a new text from an unknown number. "You forgot to check the closet." I never do. My name's Daniel, and I've been renting out rooms in my old 2-story house for about 5 years now. It's a decent side income, and most of my tenants have been normal folks, students, remote workers, the occasional traveler. But then there was him. Ethan, if that was even his real name, showed up last October, dressed in this weirdly crisp button-down, like he was going to a job interview, but his eyes never quite met mine. Paid in cash, always exact change. And when I asked for social media or an emergency contact, he just smiled and said, "I like keeping things private." Should have been my first red flag, but money was tight, and he never caused trouble. At least, not that I knew about. For months, everything seemed fine. Ethan left at the same time every morning, came back at midnight sharp, and never made a sound. His room was right above mine, but I never heard footsteps, music, nothing. Just silence. The only rule he had was no one entered his room, not even for repairs. "I'll handle anything that breaks," he'd say, and weirdly, nothing ever did. Until last week. I was making coffee when I noticed it, a dark, spreading stain on my ceiling. Water damage. I knocked on Ethan's door, but no answer. Texted him, left on read. The leak was getting worse, so I did what any landlord would do. I grabbed my master key and went in. What I saw still makes my skin crawl. The second I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Stale air, like a closet that hadn't been opened in years, mixed with something sweet and rotten. The room was spotless, but not in a clean way. It felt preserved. The bed was made military tight, not a wrinkle. No clothes, no trash, not even a toothbrush on the sink. Just this emptiness. My eyes darted to the leak. A pipe under the sink had burst, but then I saw the wall. At first, I thought it was wallpaper, some weird texture design. But when I got closer, my stomach dropped. Photos, dozens of them, pinned in perfect rows, floor to ceiling. And every single one was of us, the other tenants, me included, sleeping. Close-ups of our faces, our hands curled under pillows, even shots through slightly open doors. How? I never heard a move at night. Never saw a camera. My hands started shaking so bad, I had to grip the dresser to stay upright. The worst part? The photos weren't just recent. There were shots of me from months ago in my own bed, wearing pajamas I'd forgotten I owned. A close-up of Sarah, the grad student downstairs, with her mouth slightly open, a strand of hair stuck to her cheek, dated 2 days after she moved in. And in the corner, a single photo with a red pushpin. Me, taken last night, my face half buried in my pillow. I'd locked my door. I always did. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and for a stupid second, I convinced myself I was dreaming. Then I heard the front door creak, open downstairs. Ethan's voice called out, "Daniel, you home? Too cheerful, too normal." I froze. The master key was still in my hand. The photos stared at me. And right then, I realized he knew I was in here. I don't know how long I stood there, but it felt like hours. Every sound from downstairs, Ethan's footsteps, the rustle of grocery bags, the hum of the fridge, sent jolts of panic through me. My reflection in the dresser mirror looked wrong, like I was already a ghost in one of his photos. I needed to get out, but the only exit was the door, and Ethan was right below me. My hands fumbled with my phone, but what would I even say to the police? My tenant takes creepy pictures. He hadn't technically broken any laws. And if he heard me calling for help, I stuffed my phone back in my pocket, sweat soaking through my shirt. That's when I noticed the notebook on the nightstand. A single word was written on the cover in neat, block letters, schedules. The notebook was worse than the photos. Page after page of our routines. When we slept, when we left the house, even notes on our habits. Daniel checks locks 3x before bed. Sarah showers at 10:47 p.m., earphones in, won't hear anything. And at the bottom of every page, a tally mark. 14 in total. 14 what? My vision blurred. The leak from the pipe dripped onto my shoe, the sound like a ticking clock. Then a creak on the stairs. He was coming up. I slammed the notebook shut, but it was too late. The bedroom door handle turned. The door opened slowly. Ethan stood there, head tilted, his smile never reaching his eyes. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said, like a kid caught stealing candy. My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs were rooted to the floor. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "It's not what you think," he lied smoothly, gesturing to the photos. "I'm an artist, a collector of moments." His voice was calm, but his fingers twitched at his sides, like he was resisting the urge to grab something. The air felt thick, suffocating. I inched toward the burst pipe, gripping the wrench I'd left on the sink earlier. "You need to leave," I croaked. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "But Daniel," he whispered, "I just got home." Something in me snapped. I swung the wrench at his head, but he dodged easily, like he'd known I'd do it. The force sent me stumbling into the wall of photos. Pins scattered. Images of our sleeping faces fluttered to the ground. Ethan's expression darkened. "You're ruining it," he hissed. I swung again, this time hitting his shoulder. He grunted, but didn't go down. Instead, he lunged, knocking us both onto the bed. The notebook fell open between us, and that's when I saw it. A fresh page with today's date. At the bottom, a new tally mark, half drawn. 15. My blood turned to ice. He wasn't just watching us. He was counting something. I kneed him in the stomach and scrambled for the door. He grabbed my ankle, but I kicked back hard. hearing a satisfying crack as my heel connected with his nose. He howled, blood spattering his pristine shirt. I didn't look back. I flew down the stairs, nearly tripping over Sarah, who was just coming out of her room. "Call 911. I screamed, shoving her toward the kitchen. She stared at me, bewildered, until Ethan's footsteps thundered above us. Then her face went white. We bolted outside, the cold air hitting me like a slap. The 911 operator answered, but all I could choke out was, "He's been inside our rooms. He's been counting." The police found Ethan's room exactly as I'd left it. Photos, notebook, everything. But he was gone, vanished. They took it seriously, at least. Turns out, the tally marks matched the number of nights he'd spent in each of our rooms while we slept. The photos were just souvenirs. Sarah moved out that same night. I didn't sleep for weeks. I boarded up his room, changed every lock, even installed cameras. But sometimes at 3 a.m., I swear I hear the faintest creak on the stairs. And every morning, I check my phone first thing, just in case there's a new notification. A missed call, a text from an unknown number, or worse, a photo. The cops never found Ethan. No records, no fingerprints, nothing. Just a name that led to a dead end. The detective told me, some people are ghosts before they disappear. I sold the house 6 months later. Couldn't stand the silence. The way every shadow felt like it was breathing. The new owner, a cheerful guy with a family, asked why I was selling so cheap. I almost told him, but then his little girl ran past us, giggling, and I just said, bad pipes. Let him think it's mold. Better than the truth, ... I still check my doors 3 times before bed. Old habit. But last week, I got a package with no return address. Inside was a notebook, the kind with lined paper. The cover blank except for one word written in familiar block letters, schedules. I didn't open it. I burned it in my driveway, watching the pages curl into black ash. The smoke smelled sweet and rotten, just like his room. That night, I dreamed of tally marks. When I woke up, my phone was on the floor, face down, and my bedroom door was slightly open. Back in 2017, I was a broke college student scraping by on instant noodles and caffeine. My old apartment got condemned, long story, so I ended up renting a room in this creaky old house near campus. My new roommate, Daniel, was this quiet, lanky med student who barely spoke, just nodded a lot and disappeared in his room by 10 p.m. sharp. At first, I thought it'd be a chill setup. No parties, no drama. But then, around the 3rd night, I started hearing it. Muffled, half-formed words creeping through the wall we shared. Not loud, but clear, like someone whispering secrets to an empty room that I didn't think much of it. People talk in their sleep, right? But after a week of hearing it every damn night, I decided to mess with him. One morning over coffee, I smirked and said, "Dude, your midnight monologues are next level. You ever consider podcasting?" I expected a laugh, maybe an embarrassed shrug. Instead, Daniel froze. His knuckles went white around his mug, and his voice dropped to this weird, shaky whisper. "I don't sleep talk. I can't. I take trazodone every night. Knocks me out cold." The way he said it, like he was pleading with me to believe him, made my stomach knot. Because if it wasn't him, what the hell was I hearing? That night, I lay in bed wide awake, straining to hear through the wall. Around 2 a.m., it started again, a low, garbled murmur, like a radio tuned, just off frequency. But this time, I pressed my ear against the cold drywall, holding my breath. The voice wasn't quite Daniel's. It had his cadence, sure, but underneath, something off. Like when you hear a bad AI impersonation, where the vowels drag just a second too long. Then it laughed. Not a sleepy chuckle, a wet, guttural sound like someone choking on their own tongue. My skin prickled. Daniel's room was empty half the time, night shifts at the hospital, but this thing never missed a night. The next morning, I checked Daniel's door. Locked as always. But when I jiggled the knob, a chemical smell seeped through the gap, sharp and medicinal. Pills, maybe. That's when I noticed the scratches. Faint, parallel grooves around the keyhole, like something had clawed at it from the inside. My brain short-circuited. I wanted to bolt, but then my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Stuck at the hospital. Be back late. Don't wait up." My blood went cold, because down the hall, behind his door, something thumped, like a headboard hitting the wall. Knock. Knock. Not that I told myself it was the pipes. The house was old. After all, maybe rats in walls. But that night, I couldn't unhear it. The voice slithered under my door, calling my name in Daniel's tone, but warped, like it was learning how to speak human. I grabbed my baseball bat and crept into the hallway. Daniel's door was slightly ajar, though I knew I'd heard him lock it. The gap was pitch black, but the smell hit me first, rotting meat and ammonia. Then a wet clicking noise like teeth snapping shut. My legs locked. Something was in there, breathing in ragged huffs. Not sleeping, waiting that I ran. Didn't stop until I was at a 24-hour diner, chugging coffee with shaking hands. The waitress eyed the bat still clutched in my grip, but didn't ask. At dawn, I texted Daniel, "Dude, what's in your room?" He replied instantly, "Nothing." What? No confusion, no questions, just denial. When I got back, his door was wide open. The room was spotless. Bed made, textbook stacked, no claw marks. But on his pillow, a clump of dark, wiry hairs too thick to be human. And his window, locked from the inside that I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I set up my laptop to record audio outside Daniel's door. If I could just prove it wasn't him, maybe I could force him to admit something was wrong. Around 3 a.m., the voice started again, but this time it wasn't muffled. It was crisp, like someone standing right behind the door. And it wasn't just talking, it was arguing. Two voices, both eerily close to Daniel's, hissing back and forth. One pleaded, stop it, they'll hear you." The other snarled, "Too late." Then silence. The next morning, I played the recording. All I got was static and one clear whisper, "You're next." I stormed into Daniel's room while he was brushing his teeth. "We need to talk," I said, shoving my phone with the recording at him. His face drained of color. For a second, I thought he'd pass out. Then he grabbed my arm, his fingers ice cold. "You have to leave. Tonight," he whispered. Before I could react, his grip tightened, too tight. His pupils dilated until his eyes looked black. "Or you'll meet the other one." His voice didn't sound human anymore. It was layered like two people speaking at once. I yanked free and bolted. His laughter followed me down the hall, bouncing off the walls like it was coming from everywhere at once, and I didn't sleep that night. I barricaded my door with my dresser and sat on my bed, staring at the wall I shared with Daniel, listening. Around 4 a.m., the knocking started, soft at first, then louder like something was trying to punch through the drywall. Then came the scratching, long, slow drags of something sharp digging into the plaster. I could hear it breathing, a wet, rattling sound just on the other side. My whole body locked up when a voice whispered, "You should have left." It wasn't Daniel's voice anymore. It was deeper, guttural, like something that had never been human. The dresser shook as something heavy slammed against the door, and I grabbed my keys and bolted for the window. But the second I touched the latch, the room went freezing. My breath came out in white puffs. Behind me, the door creaked open, but the dresser hadn't moved. The hallway was pitch black, and standing in the doorway was a silhouette, hunched and too tall, its head brushing the ceiling. It didn't move. It didn't have to. I could feel it smiling. Then Daniel's voice, but twisted and broken, oozed out of the dark. "You met the other one." I threw myself out the window, landed hard on the fire escape, and ran until my lungs burned that I never went back. I crashed on a friend's couch and reported the whole thing to the landlord, who just shrugged and said Daniel had moved out overnight, left all his stuff behind. The cops found his room spotless, except for one thing. The walls were covered in faint, handwritten lines of the same phrase. Over and over, "I don't sleep talk." They ruled it a mental health crisis. But I know what I heard. Why, I saw it a year later. I got a Facebook message from an unknown account. No text, just a voice clip. I played it, and my blood turned to ice. It was Daniel's voice, but wrong. "You're lucky," it whispered. I ran out of pills. Then laughter, the same wet, choking sound from behind his door. I deleted the app, changed my number. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I hear knocking. And I know better than to answer.